We are live.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, once again, and welcome to the virtual meeting of the Corporate Governance and Human Resources Committee of the TSHC, which is also right now, as we heard, being live streamed on YouTube. So in addition to our participating board directors and the leadership team, I would also like to welcome our virtual audience and thank you so much for joining us today. And just a reminder that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month and Women's History Month. I would also like to acknowledge that October 10th is World Mental Health Day. And this year's theme is mental health is a universal human right. Also, October 10th is also World Homeless Day, which is aimed to prevent and end homelessness with alleviating the suffering of those experiencing homelessness. So today, the key items on the agenda are the Toronto Seniors Housing Tenant Human Rights Policy and the board and governance policies, which have been brought back from our June 12th discussion. We also have a few other items to discuss in the closed agenda. So on that note, we will now go to the land acknowledgement. Which is item 2, so the land and African ancestral acknowledgements. Land acknowledgements are as follows. Toronto Seniors Housing acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Shanawbeg and Chippewa and Haudenosaunee and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. The African Ancestral Acknowledgement. Toronto Seniors Housing acknowledges all treaty people, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery, we pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. So now we'll go to the approval of the public meeting, which is item number 3. So are there any amendments, anybody, to the public meeting agenda in front of us? If there's no amendments, hearing none, then I will ask one of the members to move and also ask for a seconder as well.
So moved,
Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I believe Warren and I didn't hear the other.
Fareed.
And Fareed, Warren and Fareed, thank you so much, both of you. Then all in favor, then it's so be it resolved that the October 7th, 2024 public meeting agenda as presented to this committee is approved. Item number 4 now, and just declarations of interest. Anyone? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to item 5, approval of public session minutes. So if there's any amendments. Okay, so hearing none, again, I'll need a mover and a seconder.
So moved, Mr. Chair. It's Warren.
Thank you, Warren. And
I can second, Mr. Chair. Fareed.
Thank you, Fareed. Okay. So with all in favor, then be it resolved that the CGHRC's June 12, 2024 public session minutes as presented are approved. That's great. We're moving along. We should be done in about 5 minutes. Okay. So we're at item number 6. Are there any amendments to the closed session minutes? That's what we're dealing with now, the approval of the closed session minutes of June 12th, 2024. Any amendments? Hearing none. Then again, I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for the June 12th, 2024 closed session minutes. Any new movers? Maybe Liz? Karen?
Lawrence.
Who?
It's
Lawrence?
Yeah.
Oh, Lawrence, sorry. Okay, I thought I saw a different name there. Okay. Lawrence and who else? And Warren, okay. All in favor, then, so may be resolved that the CGHRC's June 12th closed session minutes as presented are approved. Item number 7, at this point, if any comments or additions to the action item list, I believe there are a couple of items on the action item list. Okay, then, and that's, there's no comments or any additions, then we will move on to item 8, which is an exciting part of this agenda where the CEO gives us his update. And Tom will go through and once we're finished with that, then we'll maybe have some questions, maybe not. So Tom, I'll leave it,
Yes.
I'll pass it on to you.
Great,
Okay.
to the chair. Thank you, and to the committee. So I just want to kind of reiterate what the chair was saying around there were many policies that we were going through today, but just in particular, I wanted to mention that the tenant human rights policy is part of our mandate and really the focus on seniors. This was a significant policy for us to move forward, and just sharing that there was extensive consultation as it related to this. With this policy, particularly with the Ombudsman's office and the HABER, and also with our tenants and so and others. But here we are here today, and very glad to be having this policy before the committee and then subsequently to the board. Also within the people and culture, I think there's 2 key reports moving through today. And once again, really this commitment as it relates to our policies, but particularly with our staff and the work that we continue wanted to kind of support them and strengthen our operations. That's important. And a reminder, in case it does not get mentioned, is that the whistleblower and the fraud and prevention policy, those will be going to AFRC for review. I also, on a really positive note, just wanted to share with this committee that we had our kind of all staff fall event, and there was a couple of board members on this call who were there, and really is very celebratory at Fort York, and we had really very good attendance, and I think that the staff enjoyed the afternoon. There was sandwiches and some food, and there was games outside and presentation of long service awards. So just, I think, a really kind of a positive and affirming time for us to all be together. Mm-hmm. And just also, I'm really pleased to announce that the Toronto Seniors Housing, our new group benefits plan, became effective on October 1st, 2024. And that once again speaks to kind of the work that our people and culture have been doing to kind of really advance and more keep pace with the City of Toronto. And also, this has been a busy time for committee and board, and now working towards the 2 board meetings that will be coming up in August. And so those points, those are my updates for today.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Tom. Appreciate that update. And so take a moment if there are questions for Tom.
Hi, it's Brenda.
Yeah, Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
I'm sorry, I'm having problems with my video, so bear with me. But I'm here.
No. Okay, thanks, Brenda, so much. So then go ahead, ask your questions.
I had a question about the human rights policy. And I don't quite know if it's covered here or if it's under discretionary. My main concern here is, and I have personally seen this, where human rights philosophy is often turned on its head and used against situations. Okay. My main concern here is, what do we do with difficult tenants that don't seem to respond and are creating unsafe environments for people? And I don't just mean this in a rhetorical sense. I mean, we have had instances where tenants have felt unsafe with their fellow tenants or the people that the tenants bring into the building. And I want to make sure, I don't know if that's the wrong way to put it, want to make sure. Mm-hmm. I'm concerned about them using, for example, if we want to evict them, and there are procedures before we go through evicting people, I recognize that. If we want to evict them, if they then turn around and use their human rights as a person of economic vulnerability or indeed disability, if they're going to use their mental health as an excuse, I've seen that happen many times to the detriment of the other people who are the victims of that person's behavior.
Mhm.
So I'm just concerned that I recognize that this hard work people have done here, very good work here, but and I don't want to just design policies around the few that refuse to comply with our policies. But I want us to be aware of these are very different times and very loaded times, and I don't want us to find that we have vulnerable people that can't get satisfaction because we can't get rid of the tenant that's causing the disruption, the harassment, or indeed the fear for safety. To me, the primary goal here is safety and security of our tenants, not what anyone's particular expression of their personality and personal circumstances are. So
Yeah.
I want to have some sense of, do we have things in place? For example, can we move the tenant out, the disrupting tenant out to another building? Or can the person who's affected be moved to a new unit if they choose to move? Tom, I don't know if you have any comments on this or
So
anyone
maybe,
else.
Tom, before you do, yeah, Tom, if you have to, I just want to interject for a sec, because the next item, very good questions and observations, Brenda. Thank you. The next item is the tenant human rights policy that will be presented by Ayuzman. And I was wondering, and Tom, if you want to add something now, but then we can come back to that again after the presentation from Ayuzman as well. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, through the chair, that was going to be my point, is that we did have it on the agenda, and then we can certainly pick up what you raised at that point, Brenda. So thank you.
Yeah, okay, as long as it's dealt with and not just glossed over, because I've had these conversations in the past and it always is glossed over in the philosophy of human rights, but it ignores the human rights of the people who are the victimized by the behavior. And we're seeing this more and more, as you know. So
Yeah, so no, absolutely, Brenda, and that's a great segue. I didn't want to interrupt you. You were
that's
doing
fine. Go right ahead.
well, but that's a great segue to Ayuzman, and then I'm sure Ayuzman will respond to your questions and comments as well.
Great.
So
Thank you.
Ayuzman, can I pass it on to you, and then you bring us up to date on the human rights policy?
Sure thing. Thank you, Councillor Prasanti. Is it okay if I answer your question after I do the presentation, Brenda?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, because that's a very important point that you did bring up, and it's something that we have been thinking through. But if I can just share some slides to provide some context first around the work that we've been doing. Can you see my slides?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I
great.
could, no, but yeah.
Okay, so I know we have a little time, so I just want to very quickly provide some background about the project, and then just touch upon the policy that we have brought to you for approval, and we'll also just go over some of the elements of the complaints procedure that we're in the process of finalizing, but that is still a work in progress. But for information, we're keen on sharing the updates on this too. So, just to start with, the basis upon which a lot of our work has evolved is the Ontario Human Rights Code. This is a provincial law that guarantees equal rights and opportunities without discrimination in 5 social areas, including housing. And it is, by extension, against the law to discriminate based on a range of different personal attributes or protected grounds, including age, race, creed, and gender identity. So, these are legal provisions that are, by extension, quite expansive. The implication is that a range of things, whether it's around how a person expresses themselves through their gender, or on mental health issues, a variety of these different sort of attributes are covered under the code, and we've been trying to think about this and incorporate this as we develop our policy and our procedure. Most importantly, as a landlord under the code, we have an obligation to maintain an environment that is free from harassment and discrimination. And so the other few points I wanted to make is the reason for why we decided to initiate our review last year was in part because the original policy and procedure that we had adopted was from TCHC, and we 2022. It just so happened that TCHC initiated their own review of the policy and procedure that we had adopted. And shortly thereafter, in 2023, the Ombudsman also had investigated TCHC's practices and found various flaws in its provisions and recommended ways to improve the human rights system. So, in light of these developments, we thought it important that we also ensure that our provisions are up to date and in compliance with the code. And in particular, the actual complaints procedure is something that works within our context and our TSHC's capacity. We are a smaller organization, so we wanted to ensure that our procedure is adapted to TSHC's context. There were also some elements in the policy that needed to be better aligned with the procedure work that we have been continuing to do as well. So as part of this work, we've done a fair amount of background research. The question on competing human rights has also come under consideration. We went through a legal review as well, have engaged our various departments to try and align on who does what with the complaints procedure. We've sought out feedback and gotten very valuable input from a range of different sources, as Tom had mentioned, the Ombudsman, the Center, the city's Human Rights Office, and we expect to engage them as we finalize the procedure over the coming months after we get approval from, or after we hope to get approval from board on the policy on the 24th. So, just before I go into the policy, I wanted to talk a little bit about the tenant consultations. We did speak to, tenants through 4 regional meetings. About 100 or so tenants participated, and these are some of the broad themes that came out of the consultations. Most prominent of pieces of feedback that came was on awareness. The tenants wanted this, more, a better understanding of, what a human rights complaint is, and what a human rights complaint isn't, and generally what human rights are, and so I think we have to think strategically about building tenants' awareness around human rights. Other issues that came up included issues around accessibility, that, the complaints process for tenants to be able to make a complaint, they should be able to do so in whichever language that they're comfortable in, for tenants with disabilities. And the other piece, which I think came up consistently, was that, if it's an internal complaints procedure, then tenants should feel comfortable making their complaints to TSHC. So we should have good confidentiality provisions in place, provisions that we're working towards in our procedure. And by extension, we should also be responsive and acknowledge a tenant's complaint pretty quickly. This is, a complaint that came up from tenants that, sometimes our complaints just get lost, and we should be, proactive about this. That means the investigation should be taken seriously, and tenants should be supported throughout the investigation process, and it should be done in a transparent way. Now, a lot of the tenants' feedback has kind of informed the complaints procedure, which I'd mentioned was something that we're developing. But the policy in front of you that we're asking for approval broadly creates this framework for a system to proactively address any human rights inquiries and complaints that are raised by tenants. It articulates some of these key human rights principles and TSHC's commitment to adhering to these principles. And then in terms of some of the key updates that have been made in this policy, it includes, updates to definitions, restructuring of the content so that it fits, our TSHC's policy format. The language has been updated to make a more explicit commitment to, upholding seniors, made some further refinements to the scope. I think just the most notable sort of update here is on the roles and responsibilities. That kind of sets the broad parameters for how we intend to address human rights complaints that they come up. And then the finer details are sort of laid out or are being worked out in the complaints procedure. As you can see here, this is still under development. There are a number of details around roles and responsibilities, reporting requirements, and so on that requires further iteration and alignment. But for your information, we wanted to share with you the kind of broad steps that we are thinking will make up a complaints procedure. And it's a representation of, I suppose, the sort of limited resources that we're trying to weave together to take these complaints and address them seriously, effectively, and efficiently. So it would look like a tenant, they would be able to make a complaint in whichever format that they find comfortable, online, email, in person, so on and so forth. Then in response to the tenant's request for responsiveness, we hope to make an initial determination of a complaint pretty quickly and advise them on whether, if it's not a human rights complaint, then advise them on steps that we would take or they would need to take to address that issue. If it's a human rights complaint, then we would further verify the complaint, and this would make a determination over the course of the next couple of weeks over how to address the complaint. So this is where, Brenda, your point about tenant-to-tenant complaints would, for example, be reviewed, and it would be under such circumstances where we would probably this would be considered a complex case. We would bring in an external investigator to help us investigate the process, investigate the complaint, and then the next few steps basically lay out the remaining pieces of how the investigation would unfold. After an investigation, TSAC would come up with various remedies to address the complaint, after which the remedies would be communicated to the complainant and the respondent. We'd then give some time for the complainant to consider the recommendations that have been made, after which, if the complainant is not satisfied with the outcome of the investigation, they have every right to take this up externally with the Ombudsman or the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal. You will see that in the policy, the options available for tenants to make a complaint as something that as one where they don't necessarily have to utilize the internal complaints mechanism that we're trying to develop. They have every right to take this externally if they so choose. We, however, are developing something internally as well as part of a way to ensure that complaints are dealt with in as many ways as possible. And so to this extent, we're also considering an appeals mechanism in the event that a tenant is not satisfied with the outcome of a discussion of an investigation, whether they can appeal it internally. At the moment, this is still to be decided, as are the various other issues around reporting and so on that I just alluded to. So with that, after board's approval, we're hoping to finalize the procedure by the end of the year, and then roll out staff trainings in early 2025, and also work on the tenant outreach and engagements and awareness piece. And so that's where I'll leave it, and I can jump to and more specifically talk about Brenda's inquiry, or stop and.
No, I think, yeah, if there's any further you want to add from Brenda's question or inquiry, yeah, I think you've already touched on a couple of spots there, but go ahead, and then Brenda, in case we missed anything. Go ahead, Eisman.
Sure. So as I'd mentioned, Brenda, the procedure broadly lays out, how we would be dealing with various types of complaints, including the more complicated ones. I'll just note that the competing human rights piece is, even under the guidelines and material that you find in the Ontario Human Rights Commission, it's tricky, and they sort of acknowledge that it happens, but it's like for us it depends. It's a very context specific issue that you kind of have to work through with legal expertise, being mindful of the fact that there are indeed several protected grounds that we can't necessarily prioritize one over another. And so the specifics of the case, the nature of the adverse treatment or the adverse impact, all have to be kind of evaluated. And so the procedure broadly kind of lays out how we would try to do this seriously as well. The other piece I'd note is that, as a tenant, we do have a duty to kind of ensure the reasonable all tenants. And so to the extent that we're seeing that there is, the kinds of issues that you've raised, there is the just tenancy management process via which we kind of issue, we take various steps to address potential, threatening behavior emerging from tenants. And
And
so
I've
I'll
seen,
kind of,
and I've seen us be ineffectual there because it's, I think what you've just described, you didn't need to describe the process because I understood what you were doing here, and I have no dispute with the process. I'm just saying I think we need to declare a statement about there should be something preempting here. There is some prioritization. And while no one wants to get into competing grounds, the reality is safety and security should be our first policy and should be something we ground ourselves in. And I'm not happy with the answers you're given or the resolution here because it doesn't really deal with the fact that, and as I say, I don't think it's a good policy to design policy and laws on the basis of the 1% that screw up. But the reality is the safety security issues are increasing and they're coming from people with multiple problems, and they're going to phrase that as a disability. So then they're going to claim their disability rights will triumph the complaints of the other tenant that they're harassing. Okay. And then you're going to get into this, they will use outside counsel, and we all know what lawyers do when they get involved in these situations. And meanwhile, once again, I want to know, can we evict the person and put them in another unit? Or conversely, and I don't believe the victim should be the one being dislocated, but if the victim wants to move, will we guarantee them, and I'm asking for that, will we guarantee them the option to move to another location? So I know this is complex because the police will do nothing in these situations. You've called them numerous times. We're spending thousands on security because of these concerns, right? And the police will not intervene because they'll say this or that. I mean, I've seen this happen in many situations. So, and the police will indicate that they feel powerless too. So I just want a couple of things here. One is I want some priority that safety and security is the number one issue that should be adhered to in terms of making decisions. And secondly, I want some guarantees that the people being victimized will have the choice of either moving out or indeed we move out the victimizer, okay? If they hide behind the disability claim, they hide behind their right to housing. And remember, the courts will look favorably on anyone who's a disadvantaged person with housing and RGI. They will not easily evict them or agree with you because they'll claim that they have no options. And then in our city right now, they truly don't have options. But I don't care about that because I care about the persons being victimized, okay? And so I just want those two guarantees in some sort of fashion.
So thank you, Brenda. So Isa, maybe again, Brenda brought up two very important points because the safety and security has to be the first and foremost important part of this policy when it comes to human rights. And I know you've touched on it, Eisman, as well, but this is coming to the board for final approval, right? It'll be ratified at the board. Any thoughts on how, and because we want to move to the other items as well. Any thoughts on how we could address that and maybe refine it or ensure that there's some, I don't know about guarantees, but level of comfort that we could give people that
Yeah.
it will be with,
Yeah.
you know, and
Council-
Tom, you wanted to add something to that? So we
Yeah,
could.
yeah, through council. I think I'll just kind of preempt Ishman on this one, but I see, and through the chair to the committee and Brenda, I think there's a risk if we start to kind of have a preeminent statement in front of
Yes.
this policy. This
Yeah.
policy is about the tenant's human right. And I think if we start to put any kind of statements in there, we are going to be stopped in our tracks
Yes.
by
That's
by
understandable.
the ombudsman, right? I worked through this at Toronto Community Housing
Yeah.
for the ombudsman and the recommendation. So this is in its purest form. We have to look at what is the policy as it relates to complaints, and we cannot make any guarantee that we are going to kind of evict, somebody from an apartment.
understand.
We have our tenancy management process in place, and I know that in 99% of the cases when there's tenant to tenant conflict and there is a tenant who is his behaviors or actions are high risk and illegal, we will work through the tenancy management process with the support of OCHA, and those people can be moved kind of out, not through OCHA, but they can move out of the apartment. And so I think we
Okay.
have to be careful about not confusing kind of these two issues, and yet be very on top of each one of these processes and training and understanding how they work, and as required, get even like legal support for how we move forward.
I understand that, Tom, and I'm aware because I've dealt with human rights for most of my life. So I know you can't make those because it will be considered in opposition to the Human Rights Code ethos. But I'd like some certainty and guarantees from senior management and you as CEO that you'll treat this issue seriously, and that whether it's a yearly or quarterly report back to the board of instances and how we
Absolutely.
resolve them.
Yeah.
And when you talk about
Absolutely.
tenant management process, I'd like to know, does it work? Is it effective? Are we dealing with these problems? And if not, why not? And I can understand why there are complexities to it. But I want some sort of certainty and commitment from senior management and CEO that these things are considered, understood, and reported back to us if there's any sort of trends or tendencies. And, we're moving people from the streets into some of our units and into other public housing units across the city. And with mixed success, and I would say 75% of all people that were moved off the street into alternate housing have failed in their housing placements. That's just the nature of some of their difficulties, okay? And so I just want some sort of confidence that, Tom, I don't know whether it requires a report back to the board or committees on some sort of regular basis. I'm flexible with that, but I just want some understanding that I get the misuse of the valuable human rights philosophy. And as soon as you get someone going with outside resources to get advocate support, you're going to be wrapped up in some sort of turmoil here. So I just want us to be prepared and conscious of these things and have some report back to the board in some capacity, if that could be arranged.
Yeah, so maybe Brenda, we could just ask Tom and Eisman to undertake to do exactly what you just asked for, and report back on a regular basis on items, on these items as well.
And how successful the tenant management process is. So if we're finding it's not suitable, if it's not working for our needs, then we need to review things. But I'd like to have some sort of analysis of the efficacy of all these efforts. How many angels on the head of a needle, and I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Brenda. Now, just to move on, any other questions? I don't think I see any hands up. So,
Mr. Chair, I have a question. It's Warren.
Warren, okay, go ahead, Warren.
Yes. Thank you. The question I
Yeah.
have, it's all very good to have a policy approved by the board. I would like to know, and it applies not only to this policy before us, but generally to all of the seniors housing corporation policies. What assurances do we have that these policies are being complied with? What mechanisms are being put in place by staff to ensure that the policies are being complied with?
Tom?
So
Eisman? Tom,
actually,
go ahead.
so this is
So-
through the chair to Warren. I would just like, so that just really speaks to our kind of, there was efficacy, kind of accountability and reporting. And certainly I think the suggestion that we respond back, and I know from my work at Toronto Community Housing, there was a commitment that the staff would be reporting back to the board and to the board. I think theirs was quarterly. We can decide on when we want to report
Yeah.
back. But that is your indication of policy. And I could just use something, anything that relates to kind of housing policy. Our indication, part of that indication that we are successful is what is our vacancy, right? Things around correct rent collections are those policies. It's what is our arrears, and those are things that we're reporting to the board. And I think to the committee's perspective about wanting some sense of kind of accountability and further knowledge around what are the outcomes, we can certainly begin to report that to the board, so that we can put together for sure.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I had my hand up. Sorry, I don't want to prolong
Yeah,
this debate.
Fareed, I didn't see that. Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, and just in interest of moving this along, I think we've canvassed this issue sufficient. I don't think we can have I think Brenda's points are valid, and I think we should sort of act on it. My recommendation would be that we approve the policy and that we request the staff to come back with a quarterly report or a biannual report on the efficacy of these policies so that the board can deliberate further on some of them. The guarantees, I think we fully canvassed that. I mean, I don't think we can provide any guarantee in this respect. And Brenda, obviously, Brenda's worked in this area before, so she has got lots and lots of experience. But I think what we're looking for here is maybe just a report back. So if the committee is in agreement, we can approve the policy and then request the staff report back to the committee on the efficacy of this, another policy. And the other quick point I would make, Mr. Chair, has to do with process, right? So I think due process is also an important consideration in dealing with some of these issues. And I didn't hear anything about due process. So maybe that's another thing that that we need to sort of focus on as well. It's one thing to have a policy, but people rights on either side need to be respected. And we just need to make sure that rules of natural justice and due process are upheld as we move towards these policies.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, excellent, Fareed. So that's good. So we'll do that. And I think Fareed, we mentioned that that Tom will undertake to report back.
Okay.
But now we have a time specific quarterly. I don't think you want to move a motion to that, so just
No.
undertake to do that. And so that'll be sufficient. And I think that will give everyone a level of comfort that we're going to be addressing this. We're going to be watching how we're progressing and all the different areas we're looking to progress successfully on. All right, so then,
Mr. Chair, I don't think quarterly is necessary because we're smaller scale. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm happy with once, twice a year. It's just,
Yeah, biannual, yeah.
yeah, that's, yeah.
Brian, all right, thank you. That's good. We don't want to overload. Our
Exactly. It's just,
okay. All right, thank you. So then, that note, I'm just going to ask for a mover and a seconder, so we can move for Fareed.
So move, Mr. Chair.
seconded, Brenda.
Thank you, Brenda and Fareed. So all in favor? Okay, so thank you. Then be resolved that this committee is approving the tenant human rights policy, and it'll be forwarded to the board for approval consideration. So let's move on now to item number 10. And we're going to ask who's doing this item here? Tessany. We'll go through the board.
Yes. Tushani.
Tushani, sorry, my apologies, Tushani. We'll go through these governance policies. And so, Tushani, are you there? I don't see.
Yes.
Where are you? Oh, there
Can
you
you
are.
hear
I see you
me?
now. Yes, I
Okay.
can hear you.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All yours.
Karen, I just see, yes, perfect. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tashani Pavanendran, and I'm the interim strategy and policy lead here at Toronto Seniors Housing. Through the chair, before you are some revisions of the governance policies, including the Board of Directors Code of Ethics and Conduct, the Board of Directors Conflict of Interest Policy, board and board committee meeting procedures, Board of Directors reimbursement policy, and the Director Education and Board Development policy. We are looking to seek committee approval of these policies and then have it forwarded to board for approval. There's also the retirement of the interim deputation policy, the Board of Directors closed meeting session policy, the interim reimbursement policy, and the external directorship policy, all with the proposed effective retirement date of October 24th, 2024. Through the chair, the staff report, along with the governance policies, were previously presented at the June 12th CGHRC meeting, so they may look a little familiar. We are revising this item after gathering additional feedback and input from the board chair and committee. I will be summarizing the feedback to show how the changes have been reflected in the documents, but you can find all of the detailed changes and edits in attachments 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. I'm just going to go over the quick summary now and just highlight some key changes. Oh, Karen, you've already put it up. Thank you. And I'll just be walking through each policy. So the first one being the Board of Directors Code of Ethics and Conduct. We have updated the language in the confidentiality section and have expanded the criteria to say anyone instead of friends and relatives. We have also, under the board level discipline section, we've changed the word removing to removal of. Next slide, please. The Board of Directors conflict of interest policy. So originally the policy stated that when there is a complaint that it should be forwarded to a senior TSHC executive officer. We have now changed it to be a little bit more specific after some feedback from the committee and board chair. And it is now the chief executive officer that the complaint will be forwarded to. In the leave of absence section, we have also removed the language around the impact of the board director's performance and duties. And then next slide, please. Thank you. Board and board committee meeting procedures. So this one's so big that it has 2 slides. So bear with me. Just some key high level changes. We have incorporated language to adhere to bylaw number 1, and we've adjusted the official notice for special meetings. It's now 24 hours. It was originally 48 hours. Additionally, TSHC will ensure that we'll provide notice and materials well in advance of the meeting whenever possible. There has also been some information from the board meeting closed session policy. It's been consolidated into this document just to centralize it, and we have it in one location. That was also feedback that we received from the committee. Furthermore, this procedure document has been expanded to encompass procedures for both the board of directors and board committee members. So originally, this procedure document was just called board meeting procedures. We've included a committee in there, and that's because there are some instances where the process is different for a committee than board. Next slide, please. You can go to the next one. Reimbursement policy. Thank you. We have included additional content to align with the city's expense travel reimbursement policy for city agencies, boards, commissions, and corporations. We have also clarified the conference expenses eligible for reimbursement section. Now, travel by a board director must be approved by the board chair and the CEO in advance. Next slide, please. Director Education and Board Development Policy. You can go to the next slide. There were changes or suggested feedback from committee and board chair. You can see it on the slide here. At the June CGHRC meeting, committee member Brenda Paris has stated that the current board should be refreshed on the policies, procedures, roles, responsibilities, and compliance requirements for the board. So in response to this, TSHC will be establishing a board development program that will cover those topics. Additionally, we will ask the directors to submit a written statement about conflicts of interests when joining the board. We can go to the next policy. Okay, so the last 4 policies are the policies that we are recommending to retire. The interim deputation policy, we are recommending to retire this policy as relevant content has been included in the board and committee meeting procedures document. And then next slide is the closed meeting session policy. We are also recommending to retire this policy. This policy as well has been integrated into the board and committee meeting procedure document. Next slide, please. Interim board reimbursement policy. This policy has been replaced by the board of directors reimbursement policy. Therefore, we recommend to retire this policy. And then last policy for retirement is the external directorship policy. So for this one, staff assessed the policy and we noticed that the requirements listed in this policy have been addressed in the employee conflict of interest policy. So we recommend to retire this policy. There is one last slide I just wanted to highlight. This was feedback for the policies overall. So at the June 12th CGHRC meeting, the committee had suggested that we adopt an IDEA lens when reviewing the next set of board of director policies. So just wanted to respond to that. An IDEA strategy, an IDEA stands for inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. Diversity, equity, and accessibility. That's currently underway at TSHC. So once we develop that, that may inform that IDEA lens to future policy development work, as well as the review cycle of policies as well. And with that, through the chair, I can take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Tushani. So, okay, questions from anyone at this point? I don't see any. Fareed, we got Fareed. Go ahead, Fareed.
Yeah, it's not a
Brenda,
question.
too.
I just want to thank staff. I mean, this has been a tremendous amount of work, long overdue, lots of heavy lifting, and I know lots of nitty gritty. And I just want to thank Tushani and the team at TSH for bringing this forward. Many of the comments that I made and the committee made, I think, were reflected. So just thank you all around to the entire team.
Thank you, Fareed. And I think, Brenda, you heard your name.
Yes, thank you. On the last point, the IDEA, it's suggested in the next round that it be incorporated. Well, the next round is 5 years from now. Are you implying that it won't be incorporated until 5 years from now?
These, through the chair, these policies we are putting forward for approval through the committee and then subsequently through the board at, I believe, the October 17th or October 24th Board of Directors meeting. So that IDEA strategy would not be developed in time, but for future policies, we will be applying that IDEA lens. I apologize, I don't know the specific timeline of them completing the IDEA strategy.
Well, your slide said in the next round of policy review, which is going to be 5 years from now. So my suggestion, obviously, I'm not talking about the current board meeting, obviously, right? But I'd like to suggest that we apply that lens now that we've got our base policies, all that hard work's been done.
Yeah.
But I think instead of waiting for the next round, I would suggest that we start incorporating some review of how to integrate, if need be. I mean, not all areas will be applicable here, but that's my suggestion because we've been talking about this for a few years now. So,
yeah.
Okay. And so that's idea number one. Second point about director education and development. I've been asking for this since day one. The idea of board development materials being available, some orientation. I had suggested that current members be involved with this. And I would like to still say that I don't think we should wait for the next round of board appointees. I think it's valuable to bring everyone up to scratch on these things. And I would like to add as one topic to add to that board orientation and any of those materials, looking at the financial reports, how to interpret them, and explaining the budgetary process. Okay, now, which is Byzantine at best. And we've just learned more thoroughly and more recently all those steps thanks to staff and Tom explaining them. But I would like to formalize that. So our main responsibility is fiduciary duty. And I think the more we're informed about those financial matters and the budgeting process at City Hall, I think the better. That's my last point about reimbursement. You detailed some things, travel, approval, et cetera, et cetera. Two things that I don't think were, or maybe it's dealt with elsewhere, so I apologize if that's the case. But you mentioned that you need approval in advance for some things or approval before you proceed. So I just want that clarified so people understand where in the process, like you approach the CEO, do you approach the board chair, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if, that can be done off camera, but I just want the clarity on that so we're aware. And under the board, Director of Education and Board Development, there were no dollar limits. So are there going to be dollar limits to any particular requests, or is that going to be at the discretion of the chair and the CEO?
Again, great questions. I think I did hear that there's, any expenses have to be approved by or trips or whatever by
Yes.
the and CEO. So that,
Yes.
very good points there, Brenda. And so
It's the little things more so, because I don't think there's going to be much travel, so per se,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? But, we had discussed at one point, a couple years back, computer. There was a suggestion a couple members needed computers because they didn't have them.
mhm.
And what was the other thing? I'm just going through my notes here, but
Okay.
just a little clarity there. And if there's dollar limits of any sort.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So we noted all those points. Tashini, did you
Yeah.
you'll get to any comments you want to
Or
make,
Tom,
or
Tom
can
can
we?
answer any.
Yes, through the chair. So I think I'm gonna go back to the first point. And I'll respond to the first point, which was around the idea
Yeah.
and the lens on the future policy. So it's not like the next,
Yeah.
sorry, just for clarity, it's not around the next set of policies like in 5 years.
Okay.
I know that right now, Carol, she's away today, but and it's been raised with the committee and the board that there is the framework, the idea framework, and there's actually somebody in-house right now who is moving that work along. So it would be our
Fine, perfect.
intention very shortly. That very shortly, all policies, there would be a formalized way of reviewing policies, tenant governance, whatever
Perfect,
policy
perfect,
through the
perfect.
ideal lens.
Okay.
So that was the one that I was
That's
going to
good.
respond to.
That's good. Thank you, because it wasn't quite
Yeah.
clear here.
Yeah.
Right. That's fine.
All right.
That's good to hear.
Thank you. Great. So thanks again. Okay, so on this item as well, I'm looking for a mover and a seconder.
Oops.
Did I hear something?
Yeah, Linda has her hand up.
Yes.
Well, I can't see here any hands up for some reason at all.
that's the
So
problem.
Linda, I apologize. I did not see it, and so I'm glad you spoke up. Go ahead, Linda.
Linda's on mute.
That's okay. And thank you. Because I have been asking.
There you are.
Oh, am I unmuted now?
Yeah, you are. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Hi. Nice to see you. And I came today because I've been asking a lot of questions. Can you hear me? I've been asking a lot of questions about these policies, and I just wanted to actually reinforce the thank you in terms of getting this work done. And I think actually particularly the committee chairs may need some support in terms of the education and having somebody at the board meetings to actually help with kind of those policies. But I think it's going to be tremendously helpful. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Linda, for that. Appreciate it. And oh, excuse me. So I still don't see any other hands. If not, then we will move on with a mover and a seconder.
So move, Mr. Chair, it's Fareed.
Hi, Fareed. I see your hand. Okay, good. And a seconder, that would be Warren or Brenda. Who spoke up? Brenda, you're the seconder?
I can second, Mr. Chair. It's Warren.
Warren? Okay, so we got Fareed and Warren. All right, thank you so much to
Sorry.
both of you, and thank you for everyone's great effort in bringing this report forward. So item 11 now is people and culture. Oh, we did, sorry, go back to that. All in favor? We should do that. I think we're all in favor, right? No, is that okay? Perfect. So this will then move forward to get ratified at the board. And so item 11, people and culture. Dave, pass that over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask you to put up the 2 slides that provide the summary? Through the chair, this is a report back from our June meeting, whereas, as Tom mentioned, some people and culture policies were brought forward, and we've made some revisions based on comments from the committee and the board chair, and going to talk about the conflict of interest policy and the code of conduct policy. As Tom mentioned, the whistleblower policy has been some revisions to that, and now it is going to AFRC to ensure there's alignment with the overall fraud prevention policy that's in the works as well.
Okay, sorry, Dave.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. So the first policy on the, move it to the next slide, please. So on the employee code of conduct policy, the feedback from this committee and the board chair were to incorporate behavioral expectations for employees who are attending virtual or on-site meetings, workshops, conferences, or training events. And that has been incorporated into the policy. And the second item was how do employees disclose receipt of gifts that exceed a certain value, and we were asked to identify a threshold value, which we did, and so the policy has been updated to include a $5 nominal value for gifts and disclosure requirements, and the just want to mention that the $5 nominal value is low, and that is intentional. Because it is our feeling that tips and gratuities there should be no expectation of tips and gratuities from our employees, and having a low threshold value reinforces that, and that was based on a scan that we did of other comparable organizations, public sector, where a typical nominal value would be $50. And we felt that is a very high threshold for our corporation and for our tenants and for our employees. So that was the reason for it. And if you could change slide 2. Oh,
hang on, Cameron. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and the employee conflict of interest policy. There was some request to review the policy to ensure a consistent identification of accountable positions, which were done. And it also mentioned that the conflict of interest policy also made reference to gifts and included that in the $5 nominal value there as well. And the third point on the next slide was again related to the IDEA lens, which Tom mentioned is under development and then will be used to review all our policies, current and the ones going forward over the coming months. And with that, happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Now again, I don't see hands, so please speak out if there's a question. Brenda, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Just a comment about the gift policy. I can appreciate this, but I think $5 is too low. And in my experience, I managed a very diverse organization, and culturally, there's some culturally specific things here. In many cultures, it's not uncommon to give a small gift to people at Christmas. I had the same problem with my staff, and I basically said it had to be like $25. And just, I think $5 is too low. Maybe $20 could be the limit, but I think it acknowledges the cultural diversity practices of people giving small gifts at Christmas or other holiday times. And I don't know if that's too difficult to implement, but I don't think it detracts from the notion that you don't want people feeling they have to be paid or tips. That doesn't imply that. It just implies that at holiday season, even like Chinese New Year, that sort of thing, I would routinely, and I wasn't even doing the direct service, I was exec director, I would still get small gifts from clients thanking me for the agency to help them. Okay, so that's just my 2 cents worth for what it's worth.
Yep. Thank you, Brenda. Okay.
Dave, I don't know what you think about that, but
I also
I'll-
have my hand
Tom,
up.
Tom's hand up is I'll defer to Tom. I'm sure he'll have
Yes,
anything about it.
Go ahead, Tom.
yes, through the chair and to the committee, and I think Brenda, I feel that the $5 would be appropriate, and particularly from my experience in long-term care, where there was a value of $20 or $25. What would happen is that tenants or residents in that case would give gifts to staff, and staff would be saying, why did that tenant give them a gift and not give me a gift? And it started to cause tension between the
yeah.
staff, and there was staff, and this also happened at City Housing Hamilton until we changed the policy. There was staff who would get several. There was $100, and they would start to get, certain property managers, whatnot, would get the disproportionate amount of gifts that were being given. And so I would just prefer that we keep it at the $5, and that way the messaging is very clear. There's
Yeah.
no need to provide our staff with these type of gifts, because it does cause friction. It's my perspective.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other comments on this?
Dave, any?
Yeah,
Not to countermand you, but I just.
All right, so
yeah.
thank you. So on Lawrence, was that you?
No, it's Fareed.
Fareed, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm torn on this one, and
Yeah,
I think
I am too. Yeah.
but the only point I want to make though, Tom, is that we have to also be careful that we're not sort of creating an undue process for declaring this stuff and spending a lot of staff time doing it, right? So someone gets $5, who do they tell? I mean, how is that record kept? What's the nature of the disclosure? I just worry a bit about the support for this kind of thing. And I don't want us to be spending too much time administering this. I think our focus should be on tenants. So I don't need to, maybe we can talk about this offline and as part of the implementation piece, but I just worry about getting, a whole bunch of $5 being disclosed somewhere to someone, and taking up a lot of staff time dealing with this issue.
Good point. Okay. All right, thank you. So, and then if we could move on, then on this item, again, I'll need a mover and a seconder. Was that you, Fareed, moving it?
Sure.
All right, thank you, Fareed. And a seconder, looks like Brenda just put up her hand. Oh, Warren? All right, Warren.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
All right, so then all in favor, and that's approved. All right, so then we will then go to item 12, which again, now we're going into the closed section of part of the meeting. I guess we need a motion for that as well, a mover and a seconder to go into closed session. Can we have 2 volunteers for that, please? Fareed
So moved.
and Brenda, thank you. All right, so now we need a moment to confirm that we are in closed session. If you could tell us when we are officially in closed session, then we will begin that part of the agenda.